Welcome to our channel, History of Everything. Today we speak about history of Saudi Arabia. Officially, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a country in West Asia and the Middle East. It covers the bulk of the Arabian Peninsula and has a land area of about 2,150,000 square kilometers, 830,000 square miles, making it the fifth largest country in Asia and the largest in the Middle East. It is bordered by the Red Sea to the west, Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait to the north, the Persian Gulf, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates to the east, Oman to the southeast, and Yemen to the south. Bahrain is an island country off its east coast. The Gulf of Aqaba in the northwest separates Saudi Arabia from Egypt and Israel. Saudi Arabia is the only country with a coastline along both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, and most of its terrain consists of arid desert, lowland, steppe, and mountains. The capital and largest city is Riyadh. The kingdom also hosts Islam's two holiest cities of Mecca and Medina. As for its use of executions, Saudi Arabia is considered both a regional and middle power. It is classified as a high-income economy by the World Bank and is the only Arab member of the G20 major economies. The Saudi economy is the largest in the Middle East and the world's 19th largest economy by nominal GDP and 17th largest by PPP. As a country with a very high Human Development Index, it offers a tuition-free university education, no personal income tax, and a free universal health care system. With its dependency on foreign labor, Saudi Arabia is home to the world's third largest immigrant population. It also has one of the world's youngest populations, with approximately 50% of its population of 32.2 million being under 25 years old. In addition to being a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Saudi Arabia is an active and founding member of the United Nations, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Arab League, Arab Air Carriers Organization and OPEC. It is also a dialogue partner of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and a candidate member of the BRICS. There is evidence that human habitation in the Arabian Peninsula dates back to about 125,000 years ago. A 2011 study found that the first modern humans to spread east across Asia left Africa about 75,000 years ago across the Bab el-Mandeb connecting the Horn of Africa and Arabia. The Arabian Peninsula is regarded as central to the understanding of evolution and dispersals of man. Arabia underwent an extreme environmental fluctuation in the Quaternary that led to profound evolutionary and demographic changes. Arabia has a rich Lower Paleolithic record, and the quantity of Oldowan-like sites in the region indicate a significant role that Arabia had played in the early hominine colonization of Eurasia. In the Neolithic period, prominent cultures such as Al-Maghar, whose center lay in modern-day southwestern Najd, flourished. Al-Maghar could be considered a Neolithic revolution in human knowledge and handicraft skills. The culture is characterized as being one of the world's first to involve the widespread domestication of animals, particularly the horse, during the Neolithic period. Al-Maghar statues were made from local stone, and it seems that the statues were fixed in a central building that might have had a significant role in the social and religious life of the inhabitants. In November 2017, hunting scenes showing images of most likely domesticated dogs, resembling the Canaan dog, and wearing leashes were discovered in Shuwaimas, a hilly region of northwestern Saudi Arabia. These rock engravings date back more than 8,000 years, making them the earliest depictions of dogs in the world. At the end of the 4th millennium BC, Arabia entered the Bronze Age, metals were widely used, and the period was characterized by its 2 meters high burials, which were simultaneously followed by the existence of numerous temples that included many freestanding sculptures originally painted with red colors. In May 2021, archaeologists announced that a 350,000-year-old Acheulean site named An-Nasim in the Hale region could be the oldest human habitation site in northern Saudi Arabia. 354 artifacts, including hand axes and stone tools, provided information about tool-making traditions of the earliest living man inhabited Southwest Asia. Paleolithic artifacts are similar to material remains uncovered at the Acheulean sites in the Nefud Desert. The earliest sedentary culture in Saudi Arabia dates back to the Ubaid period at Dosaria. Climatic change and the onset of aridity may have brought about the end of this phase of settlement, as little archaeological evidence exists from the succeeding millennium. 68 The settlement of the region picks up again in the period of Dilmun in the early 3rd millennium. Known records from Uruk refer to a place called Dilmun, associated on several occasions with copper, and in later periods it was a source of imported woods in southern Mesopotamia. Scholars have suggested that Dilmun originally designated the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, notably linked with the major Dilmunite settlements of an-Nasi and ar Ramad in the interior and Taraut on the coast. It is likely that Taraut Island was the main port and the capital of Dilmun. Mesopotamian inscribed clay tablets suggests that, in the early period of Dilmun, a form of hierarchical organized political structure existed. In 1966, an earthwork in Taraut exposed an ancient burial field that yielded a large statue dating to the Dilmunite period, mid-3rd millennium BC. The statue was locally made under the strong Mesopotamian influence on the artistic principle of Dilmun. By 2200 BC, the center of Dilmun shifted for unknown reasons from Taraut and the Saudi Arabian mainland to the island of Bahrain, and a highly developed settlement emerged there, where a laborious temple complex and thousands of burial mounds dating to this period were discovered. By the Late Bronze Age, a historically recorded people and land, Midian and the Midianites, in the northwestern portion of Saudi Arabia are well documented in the Bible. Centered in Tabuk, it stretched from Wadi Araba in the north to the area of Al-Way in the south. 69. The capital of Midian was Kuraya. It consists of a large, fortified citadel encompassing 35 hectares, and below it lies a walled settlement of 15 hectares. The city hosted as many as 12,000 inhabitants. The Bible recounts Israel's 2 wars with Midian, somewhere in the early 11th century BC. Politically, the Midianites were described as having a decentralized structure headed by 5 kings: Evi, Rechem, Sur, Hur, and Reba. The names appears to be toponyms of important Midianite settlements. It is common to view that Midian designated a confederation of tribes. The sedentary element settled in the Hijaz while its nomadic affiliates pastured and sometimes pillaged as far away as Palestine. The nomadic Midianites were one of the earliest exploiters of the domestication of camels that enabled them to navigate through the harsh terrains of the region. At the end of the 7th century BC, an emerging kingdom appeared in northwestern Arabia. It started as a sheikdom of Dedan, which developed into the kingdom of Liyan. During this period, Dedan transformed into a kingdom that encompassed much a wider domain. In the early 3rd century BC, with bustling economic activity between the south and north, Liyan acquired large influence suitable to its strategic position on the caravan road. The Lianites ruled over a large domain from Yathrib in the south and parts of the Levant in the north. In antiquity, Gulf of Aqaba used to be called Gulf of Liyan, a testimony to the extensive influence that Liyan acquired. The Lianites fell into the hands of the Nabateans around 65 BC upon their seizure of Hegra, then marching to Tama, and to their capital Dedan in 9 BC. The Nabateans ruled large portions of North Arabia until their domain was annexed by the Roman Empire, which renamed it Arabia Petraea, and remained under the rule of the Romans until 630. Shortly before the advent of Islam, apart from urban trading settlements, such as Mecca and Medina, much of what was to become Saudi Arabia was populated by nomadic pastoral tribal societies. The Islamic prophet Muhammad was born in Mecca in about 570 CE. In the early 7th century, Muhammad united the various tribes of the peninsula and created a single Islamic religious polity. Following his death in 632, his followers expanded the territory under Muslim rule beyond Arabia, conquering territory in the Iberian Peninsula in the west to parts of Central and South Asia in the east, citation needed, in a matter of decades. Arabia became a more politically peripheral region of the Muslim world as the focus shifted to the newly conquered lands. Arabs originating from modern-day Saudi Arabia, the Hejaz in particular, founded the Rashidun, 632 to 661, Umayyad, 661 to 750, Abbasid, 750-1517, and the Fatimid, 909-1171 caliphates. From the 10th century to the early 20th century, Mecca and Medina were under the control of a local Arab ruler known as the Sharif of Mecca, but at most times the Sharif owed allegiance to the ruler of one of the major Islamic empires based in Baghdad, Cairo, or Istanbul. Most of the remainder of what became Saudi Arabia reverted to traditional tribal rule. For much of the 10th century, the Ismaili Shiite Qarmatians were the most powerful force in the Persian Gulf. In 930, the Qarmatians pillaged Mecca, outraging the Muslim world, particularly with their theft of the Black Stone. 86. In 1077-1078, an Arab sheikh named Abdullah bin Ali al-Uyuni defeated the Qarmatians in Bahrain and Al-Hassa with the help of the Seljuk Empire and founded the Uyunid dynasty. The Uyunid Emirate later underwent expansion with its territory stretching from Najd to the Syrian desert. They were overthrown by the Usafids in 1253. Usafid rule was weakened after Persian rulers of Hormuz captured Bahrain and Qatif in 1320. The vassals of Ormuz, the Shia Jarwani dynasty, came to rule eastern Arabia in the 14th century. The Jabrids took control of the region after overthrowing the Jarwanids in the 15th century and clashed with Hormuz for more than 2 decades over the region for its economic revenues, until finally agreeing to pay tribute in 1507. Al-Muntafiq tribe later took over the region and came under Ottoman suzerainty. The Bani Khalid tribe later revolted against them in the 17th century and took control. Their rule extended from Iraq to Oman at its height, and they too came under Ottoman suzerainty. In the 16th century, the Ottomans added the Red Sea and Persian Gulf coast, the Hejaz, Asir and Al-Asa, to the empire and claimed suzerainty over the interior. One reason was to thwart Portuguese attempts to attack the Red Sea, hence the Hejaz, and the Indian Ocean. The Ottoman degree of control over these lands varied over the next 4 centuries with the fluctuating strength or weakness of the empire's central authority. 98-99, these changes contributed to later uncertainties, such as the dispute with Transjordan over the inclusion of the Sanjak of Ma'an, including the cities of Ma'an and Aqaba. The emergence of what was to become the Saudi royal family, known as the Al Saud, began at the town of Diriyah in Nejd in Central Arabia with the accession as Emir of Muhammad bin Saud on the 22nd of February 1727. In 1744 he joined forces with the religious leader Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, founder of the Wahhabi movement, a strict puritanical form of Sunni Islam. This alliance provided the ideological impetus to Saudi expansion and remains the basis of Saudi Arabian dynastic rule today. The Emirate of Diriyah, established in the area around Riyadh, rapidly expanded and briefly controlled most of the present-day territory of Saudi Arabia, sacking Karbala in 1802, and capturing Mecca in 1803. In 1818, it was destroyed by the Ottoman viceroy of Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha. The much smaller Emirate of Nejd was established in 1824. Throughout the rest of the 19th century, the Al Saud contested control of the interior of what was to become Saudi Arabia with another Arabian ruling family, the Al Rashid, who ruled the Emirate of Jabal Shamar. By 1891, the Al Rashid were victorious and the Al Saud were driven into exile in Kuwait. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire continued to control or have a suzerainty over most of the peninsula. Subject to this suzerainty, Arabia was ruled by a patchwork of tribal rulers, with the Sharif of Mecca having preeminence and ruling the Hejaz. 108 In 1902, Abdul Rahman's son, Abdul Aziz, later known as Ibn Saud, recaptured control of Riyadh, bringing the Al Saud back to Nejd, creating the third Saudi state. Ibn Saud gained the support of the Ikhwan, a tribal army inspired by Wahhabism and led by Faisal al-Dash, and which had grown quickly after its foundation in 1912. With the aid of the Ikhwan, Ibn Saud captured Al-Asa from the Ottomans in 1913. In 1916, with the encouragement and support of Britain, which was fighting the Ottomans in World War I, the Sharif of Mecca, Hussein bin Ali, led a pan-Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire to create a united Arab state. Although the revolt failed in its objective, the Allied victory in World War I resulted in the end of Ottoman suzerainty and control in Arabia, and Hussein bin Ali became king of Hejaz. Ibn Saud avoided involvement in the Arab revolt and instead continued his struggle with the Al Rashid. Following the latter's final defeat, he took the title Sultan of Nejd in 1921. With the help of the Ikhwan, the kingdom of Hejaz was conquered in 1924-25, and on the 10th of January 1926, Ibn Saud declared himself king of Hejaz. For the next 5 years, he administered the two parts of his dual kingdom as separate units. After the conquest of the Hejaz, the Ikhwan leadership's objective switched to expansion of the Wahhabist realm into the British protectorates of Transjordan, Iraq and Kuwait, and began raiding those territories. This met with Ibn Saud's opposition, as he recognized the danger of a direct conflict with the British. At the same time, the Ikhwan became disenchanted with Ibn Saud's domestic policies, which appeared to favor modernization and the increase in the number of non-Muslim foreigners in the country. As a result, they turned against Ibn Saud and, after a 2-year struggle, were defeated in 1929 at the Battle of Sibilla, where their leaders were massacred. 113 On Ibn Saud's behalf, Prince Faisal declared the unification on the 23rd of September 1932, and the two kingdoms of Hejaz and Nejd were unified as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. 84 That date is now a national holiday called Saudi National Day. The new kingdom was reliant on limited agriculture and pilgrimage revenues. In 1938, vast reserves of oil were discovered in the Al-Asa region along the coast of the Persian Gulf, and full-scale development of the oil fields began in 1941 under the U.S.-controlled Aramco, Arabian American Oil Company. Oil provided Saudi Arabia with economic prosperity and substantial political leverage internationally. Cultural life rapidly developed, primarily in the Hejaz, which was the center for newspapers and radio. However, the large influx of foreign workers in Saudi Arabia in the oil industry increased the pre-existing propensity for xenophobia. At the same time, the government became increasingly wasteful and extravagant. By the 1950s, this had led to large governmental deficits and excessive foreign borrowing. In 1953, Saud of Saudi Arabia succeeded as the King of Saudi Arabia. In 1964, he was deposed in favor of his half-brother Faisal of Saudi Arabia, after an intense rivalry, fueled by doubts in the royal family over Saud's competence. In 1972, Saudi Arabia gained a 20% control in Aramco, thereby decreasing U.S. control over Saudi oil. In 1973, Saudi Arabia led an oil boycott against the Western countries that supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War against Egypt and Syria, leading to the quadrupling of oil prices. In 1975, Faisal was assassinated by his nephew, Prince Faisal bin Musaid, and was succeeded by his half-brother King Khalid. By 1976, Saudi Arabia had become the largest oil producer in the world. Khalid's reign saw economic and social development progress at an extremely rapid rate, transforming the infrastructure and educational system of the country. In foreign policy, close ties with the U.S. were developed. In 1979, two events occurred which greatly concerned the government and had a long-term influence on Saudi foreign and domestic policy. The first was the Iranian Islamic Revolution. It was feared that the country's Shiite minority in the eastern province, which is also the location of the oil fields, might rebel under the influence of their Iranian co-religionists. There were several anti-government uprisings in the region, such as the 1979 Qatif uprising. The second event was the Grand Mosque seizure in Mecca by Islamist extremists. The militants involved were in part angered by what they considered to be the corruption and un-Islamic nature of the Saudi government. The government regained control of the mosque after 10 days, and those captured were executed. Part of the response of the royal family was to enforce the much stricter observance of traditional religious and social norms in the country, for example, the closure of cinemas, and to give the ulema a greater role in government. Neither entirely succeeded as Islamism continued to grow in strength. Growth in unemployment have contributed to discontent and have been reflected in a rise in civil unrest and discontent with the royal family. In response, a number of limited reforms were initiated by King Fahd. In March 1992, he introduced the Basic Law, which emphasized the duties and responsibilities of a ruler. In December 1993, the Consultative Council was inaugurated. It is composed of a chairman and 60 members, all chosen by the king. Fahd made it clear that he did not have democracy in mind, saying, "A system based on elections is not consistent with our Islamic creed, which approves of government by consultation, shura." In 1995, Fahd suffered a debilitating stroke, and the Crown Prince, Abdullah, assumed the role of de facto regent. However, his authority was hindered by conflict with Fahd's full brothers, known, with Fahd, as the soudiArabia 7. Thank you for listening, friends. Keep support.